Welcome to Cork Live for our studio debate on the 8th referendum. I'm your host, Mark O'Sullivan. I'd like to welcome my four guests, Dr. Brendan Crowley, Maeve O'Halloran, Niamh Cosgrove and Rebecca Herkerty. So first of all, I'm going to go straight to Maeve. Maeve, can you give me 2 minutes on the referendum, please?
Compassion and support. These are two things all of us want to vote for this Friday. Sadly, the government's extreme proposal for wide-ranging abortion doesn't offer either of these things to mothers or their unborn babies. Abortion stops the beating heart of a child and often breaks the heart of a mother, and in many cases of a father too. It has become increasingly clear that this referendum is not about abortion in limited circumstances. This is a referendum about abortion on request. Even Leo Varadkar acknowledged that for many Irish people, it may be a step too far. Simon Harris's bill, which viewers can read online, clearly defines termination of pregnancy as a medical procedure intended to end the life of the fetus. The aim of this government is that by the end of this year, abortion would be legal in Ireland, up to 12 weeks for any reason, up to 6 months on grounds very similar to those in Britain, and even beyond viability in certain circumstances. I'm conscious that many people watching this debate may be pro-life, but are also worried about the sad, tragic, rare situations that can occur during pregnancy. If you find yourself in this group, I encourage you to vote no. Make the government go back to the drawing board and do much better in terms of what we're voting on. Now, even many pro-choice people are stating that they will be voting no because this proposal is just too extreme. We have all become acutely aware that this government has not done enough to support women or families. To those who share my concern about this, I would say to you that by voting no, we can come together as a society to work for improved services and supports to help all of those facing difficult pregnancies. In fact, the only way to stop abortion on demand becoming a reality in Ireland is to vote no on Friday, May 25th.
Thank you, Maeve. Now I go to Rebecca O'Halloran, please.
So in 2011, I was living in London and I experienced a crisis pregnancy. I was in college. I was pretty terrified. I was lucky that I had a very understanding woman, a crisis pregnancy counsellor. She offered me all of my options. With her support, I made the decision in conjunction with my partner that I was going to continue my pregnancy. At 6 weeks, I ended up at A&E. I was diagnosed with a condition called hyperemesis gravidarum. I was in and out of hospital for the next couple of weeks, becoming so weak that I couldn't care for myself. So at 14 weeks, I made the decision to move back to Ireland so that my family could care for me. I was vomiting up to 60 times a day. The motion of taking a few steps would be enough to trigger an episode. Every smell or texture felt unbearable and my life was a countdown to the end of the pregnancy, even though it was very wanted. In the middle of the pregnancy, I had very brief relief for about 3 weeks, but when the symptoms returned, worse than before, as they do with hyperemesis, I sunk into a deep depression. I had gotten through with humour and the loving support of my friends and family, but I was absolutely broken. Every movement triggered uncontrollable vomiting, and I couldn't let myself hope that he would survive because it seemed too unlikely in the circumstances. So I begged for them to take him out at 35 weeks because I didn't want him to die with me. And at this point, I desperately did just want to die. Life had become waking in my hospital bed, injections, tears, sleep and repeat, and eventually I just stopped crying because there was no point. It felt like nobody could hear me or see me anymore because I wasn't a person. I waited for death or birth, no longer being a human being. My son is thankfully 5 now, and I got through with the support of my family, but knowing that I could suffer with prenatal depression again, that I'm almost guaranteed to suffer hyperemesis again, I'm terrified of becoming pregnant in Ireland. How could we afford the medications, the childcare? What if I'm not well enough to travel? What if I can't keep the abortion pill down? What if I go to that dark place and I can't get back out this time? The only person who should make this decision is myself and my partner in the interest of our family. It is a private decision.
Thanks, Rebecca. Rebecca, while you're there, in 2014, 26 abortions were carried out under protection of life during pregnancy bill, 3 of which were carried out due to a threat of suicide. The Yes campaign have focused on the hard cases such as rape and incest, but the majority of abortions carried out are social abortions. What is the Yes response to this?
Well, I would say to that like basically those hard cases are people. There are friends, there are families, there are sisters, there are daughters. They have lived experience and they have lives, and they are entitled to make those private personal decisions in conjunction with their healthcare providers. What's being offered here is a extremely restrictive law that will have a 72-hour cooling off period. There is no kind of abortion for disability grounds that is not in any of the legislation, and it's a complete red herring.
Maeve, can you respond to that?
Well, maybe
please?
I'll just quickly pick up on the last point that Rebecca made, just that even though the legislation doesn't specifically allow for disability as a grounds, unless it's a life-limiting condition of a baby, in which case it does allow for a life-limiting condition. That means that baby's life could be ended right up to birth. There is no gestational limit in our procedures, but actually the law doesn't need to, because up to 12 weeks abortion is allowed for any reason at all. And we know that Down syndrome, for example, can be diagnosed fully before 12 weeks, so that could be used as a grounds. Already in Ireland, 50% of babies who get a diagnosis of Down syndrome in the womb have their lives ended by abortion. And I think it would be naive to think that our rates wouldn't increase in the same way they have right across Europe, where in Britain 90% of babies with a disability are diagnosed, are aborted. And that is something I think we would never want to see in Ireland. And I would hope that we can continue to be a place where we continue to improve support services for all families, so that no family would fear that they might not be able to support their child, and that they would know that the state would take care of them.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Brendan Crowley, a zygote is an unique being that is distanced from the mother. He or she has 46 unique chromosomes and is internally driven to grow into more mature stages. When a woman says it's her right to have an abortion by claiming my body, my choice, is she ignoring the facts of life and medical science?
I think the first thing to look at there, Mark, is the fact that as verified by Peter Boylan, who's involved in the Yes campaign, life begins at conception, and that, you know, if left uninterrupted, there's a full-scale development onto a born and fully developed human being like you and I, and we've all passed through that stage. I think that, yes, I believe that a big part of the Yes campaign is to try and dehumanise the baby, and to talk about it being part of her body. In fact, as is evidenced by science, it is a separate body. There's a separate heart, there's separate limbs, separate entity. And I think there's been a lot of talk about choice and a lot of talk about compassion and choice. I would ask, where is the choice of the child? Where is the compassion that could be shown for the child? True compassion is for mother and baby. A lot of this debate has been set in a tone whereby the mother and the child are in conflict with one another, and such is not the case. Nature doesn't advocate for such a dynamic, and I think, you know, when we look at this, we're also being asked to trust women and to trust doctors, and to that I would say that no man, woman or child or anyone of any profession, especially a doctor, should be entrusted with the power to end human life. It's not healthcare. We're being asked, without any consultation from the government, as GPs, we're being asked to deliberately administer a pill that will end the life of one of our patients. Now, that is not healthcare, that's not medicine. There is no evidence. That violates the first law, the first underlying principle of being a doctor, to do no harm. Secondly, we refer to evidence-based medicine. Now, there is no evidence in the worldwide literature to support abortion being therapeutic for a woman. So I can't stand over, even ethics aside, talking about abortion as an intervention. It is not therapeutic. And if us going down this path, it is the wrong path. We need to support these women. We need to support the mothers and the babies, and there are other ways. There are much better ways.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Brendan Crowley. Niamh Cosgrove, can you respond to that, please?
Sure. Well, what I think we're looking at with this is that we're looking at a balance of rights. The rights of the woman who is pregnant, and also the rights of the fetus inside her womb. Now, the Eighth Amendment is far too blunt an instrument to weigh up those rights, particularly when the situation gets difficult, when there are health issues, when there are mental health issues, when there are issues surrounding the security or safety or financial security of a woman. And a woman who chooses an abortion is balancing all of those rights in a way that the Eighth Amendment can't. She's looking at her family, she's looking at her financial situation, she's looking at her born children, the children that are already in her life and who she is responsible for until they reach maturity and beyond. She is looking at how continuing a pregnancy will affect her family, affect her life, and affect the children that she already has and the people who surround her. And if she decides that in the interests of herself and her family, a termination is the best option, then I believe she is the person best placed to make that decision.
Thank you, Maeve. Maeve, while you're there, in the state and its people comfortable with existing in a country where healthcare services that are legal in most countries in the European Union and not in Ireland, access to bona fide health services for the aftercare of such women and ignored due to the lack of legislation on this subject, how would you respond to this?
So I think what I would say first of all is I would reiterate what Dr. Crowley just said, that abortion is not healthcare. It ends the life of a living human being. But I would also say I think there's been a lot of scaremongering in this campaign to suggest that women in Ireland are not safe. In fact, nothing could be further from the truth. Ireland is one of the safest countries in the world when it comes to healthcare for pregnant women and for care of their babies. So Irish women need not be afraid of going to their doctor in any situation. And I think it's important as well, there's been a lot of scaremongering as well about if a woman has taken an abortion pill illegally at home. I think firstly we need government health warnings. We have seen no government health warnings. All this talk about it being dangerous and no health warnings. And also what I think is really important for people to know is that in the Medical Council guidelines of Ireland, all medics have a duty to provide care, support and follow-up for women who have had an abortion. So I would encourage any woman who does take an illegal abortion pill at home or who has any complications from an abortion to please go to their doctor, be honest about what happened, because then you will get the best healthcare. But in Ireland we are very fortunate to have one of the safest countries in the world. We're number 6 according to the World Health Organization in terms of safety for pregnant women. So I think that's really important. We have excellent healthcare. Ending a life is not healthcare, and I think we can do much better to support both mothers and babies and to look at how we can address these really challenging situations. We've seen Rebecca had a tragic story of her experience during pregnancy, and we know many people experience difficulties during pregnancy, and I would like to that we would work on improving that if there are gaps there. And I just finally want to refer to obstetrician Trevor Hayes, who was the obstetrician of the year in 2013. He said in all his years of medical practice, he has never been prevented by the Eighth Amendment from doing everything necessary to fully care for women and to fully fully protect them in his practice. So I think Irish women should be reassured they are safe during pregnancy in Ireland.
Okay, thank you, Maeve. Rebecca, can you respond to that, please?
I mean, I can't understand. Where's the continuity of care for the women who receive a diagnosis of a fatal fetal condition? Where's their continuity of care? You're handing off their file, they're going away, they're leaving their family, they're facing this unbelievably difficult situation, and I can't, where is the care, and compassion for the women drinking bleach and taking pills off the internet? You don't need to have a public health warning on that. People know that buying drugs on the internet is a bad idea, but they do it because they're desperate, and they always will. And what it comes down to is, do we want to punish those women, or do we want to make it so that they don't feel like they're risking their lives and their livelihood and they're travelling in shame like this? I mean, the aftercare in other countries, 77% of people in France who have an abortion leave on a long-term contraception. So these are the ancillary recommendations of this legislation.
Okay, thank you, Niamh. Should women have the right to terminate a pregnancy because they have been victimised? We all agree it isn't fair when a woman is raped and then faces the crisis and hardships that come with the unplanned pregnancy. In fact, it's a tragic. But does it give her or anyone else the right to have a termination of pregnancy? Niamh.
So the thing here is interesting. It says in the question, or anyone else. So we're talking about everyone. Does anyone have the right to terminate a pregnancy? And what we're talking about here is a definition of who deserves an abortion and who doesn't deserve an abortion. What are the good abortions and what are the bad abortions? What are the abortions we can understand versus the ones we don't understand? So we can understand fatal fetal abnormality. We understand that one. And then we start to talk about rape, and we say we can understand rape, but once you start deciding whose abortion is right and whose abortion is wrong, where do you draw the line? So should it only be fatal fetal abnormality and not rape? Are we saying that women who are raped don't deserve a termination if they feel that they could not go through with the pregnancy and could not raise that child or give it up for adoption? Maybe it's only violent rape should be allowed to have an abortion or a termination, and not rape by maybe a husband or somebody that you know. Who's going to make the decision about that? What kind of level of proof are we going to ask if we're talking about rape victims and we decide who gets one and who doesn't get one based on their awful situation? Should we have trauma to the woman? Should we have bleeding? Should she have tried to fight them off? And this is the whole reason why the Citizens' Assembly and the Oireachtas Committee, after much deliberation and many expert witnesses, decided to have abortion up to 12 weeks with no specific reason given. And that's because it is entirely up to the woman to decide whether the abortion is needed by her. Her and her medical professional together will make that decision.
Thank you, Niamh. Dr. Brendan Crowley, can you respond to that?
I think what we need to remember first and foremost when we start discussing this is that, and this is to be fair for people at home who are trying to make up their mind on this issue, is that the cases that are used, such as so-called fatal fetal abnormality and rape, they're all tragic cases, and they're all harrowing in the sense of the emotional turmoil that they cause people, and we recognise that on both sides. I think it's important to frame it before we discuss it, that it constitutes approximately 2% of the total amount of abortions that will take place, and we know this from international figures across the board. What's been advocated for by the government is wide-ranging abortion, that a woman need not present a reason for her abortion up to 12 weeks and up to 6 months on very unspecified health grounds. And I think also to note that with the cases such as we mentioned, these rare and tragic cases, it's often insinuated, I suppose, by the way it's brought up, that abortion is somehow a solution to this tragedy, and such is not the case. And I mean, we know this from research. We need look no further than the case of Miss C, who was a young 13-year-old girl who in 1997 was brought by the state for an abortion over to the UK, and when she came out after the procedure, she looked for her baby. And the reality is that she has spoken about the fact that the trauma of rape, whilst harrowing, she has learned and has grown to get over this. However, the trauma of abortion, she has been unable to get over. So I think we need to remember that when we're making these decisions.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Brendan Crowley. I'll go to Rebecca. Rebecca, have you an open question?
Sure. So since we're in a very privileged position that the UK is so close, do you wish to remove the right to travel, or do you only have an issue with poor and marginalised women having abortion access?
Maeve, can you answer that for me, please?
Well, firstly, I think we can't regulate what other countries do in their jurisdictions. What we can do is look at what we do here. And what we are saying here, what we have done with the 8th Amendment, is it says, let's protect both mother and baby. We recognise that an unborn baby has just as much of a right to be alive as any one of us, but as has been said numerous times in this overall debate, a woman's life will be prioritised in these cases. So we're not suggesting that we put in a travel ban, but what we are saying is that when we look at the rates in Ireland of abortion, it's a fraction of the rates in Britain, for example. They have around 300% more abortions than we do here. So we don't want a situation where we have that here. We did an actuarial report recently to look at what would the rates be like if we were like the other countries in Europe that have similar laws to the ones that Simon Harris is proposing. And what we found is that between now and 2030, if we had the average rate of these 7 other countries we looked at, we would have 64,000 more abortions between now and 2030. That's 5,300 extra per year, 100 extra per week, or 14 extra abortions per day. And I think that is not something any of us want in this country. Our rates of abortion have been falling, they're lower, and I think what the government has failed to do is look at why do women have abortions, why do they travel, and how can we address the root cause of that problem, the root cause of those better supports, so that we continue to have fewer and fewer women being in that desperate position where they feel they have no other supports, no other options.
So we've had 35 years of trying other things. We've had 3 different legislative attempts to put, for example, fatal fetal conditions into the legislation, and they've all been proven to be unconstitutional. So after 35 years, where are the answers?
Well, what I would say to that is that in recent years, I would agree with you, not enough has been done. But in recent years, we've had Oireachtas committees, government hearings, citizens' assemblies, all focused on trying to legalise abortion. None of those have focused on how else could we look at these things. They haven't looked at the problems, they've looked at how can we legalise abortion. And what we would like to see is people actually sitting down after this referendum, that we all sit down together and we say, okay, let's take each of these really difficult cases and let's look at how we address them. Because I agree with you, the government has failed Irish women, the government hasn't done enough to support women in Ireland or families in Ireland, and that is something we hope will change after this referendum. Now that a lot of things have been brought out into the open and are being openly discussed, I hope those discussions will continue.
But is it not clear that the abortion rate is falling because of the abortion pill and because women can easily access it online?
That's just not true.
How do you know that? Where's your
because
proof?
even with the statistics that...
Okay, I'm just gonna go, sorry, I'm gonna cut you down and I'm gonna go to Dr. Brendan Crowley. And I want you to quote on that.
Okay, could I ask Niamh just to describe the development of a 12-week-old fetus for me?
Brendan, you're the doctor. I'm not a doctor.
I appreciate that, Niamh, but
so
I think the people at home need to know if they're voting on terminating and ending the lives of these people. We need to know the development of the baby decision, because we've heard various.
Okay, well,
kind of
I'll tell you something interesting about the development of a fetus that I did read. I read the Royal College of Obstetrician and Gynecologists report on fetal pain. They did a study on fetal pain, and I was specifically looking at it because somebody asked me, when does a fetus start to feel pain? When are they capable of feeling pain? Is it possible that during a termination they would feel pain? So I specifically went off and looked it up, and even though I'm not a medical person, I spent a lot of time reading it and trying to understand it. Basically, there is some, they are a little bit unsure as to when it happens, but basically they are very sure that it doesn't happen before about 20 weeks and are reasonably sure that it doesn't happen until about 24 weeks. So to answer your question about the development of a fetus, even though certain people on the no side say that the fetus is fully developed by 12 weeks, actually, there are still things that are happening. It may have fingers and toes and limbs and so on, but there are crucial things that are happening inside the fetus as part of its development that will allow it to come to maturity. For example, the lungs aren't mature either, and that is why a 12-week-old fetus can't be born and survive.
Okay. Can I just say, in response to that are we really saying that whether a young unborn child can feel pain or not should be the determinant as to whether we have a permission to terminate their life?
I think that's important to some women to know that.
But I think that to be fair, the child has no choice in this. I think that's what we need to reference. And I think just to look at the fact that certain development has to take place. Of course there's further development to place, but to be fair about it, after a child is born, a newborn child, there is further development that takes place.
So I think for the no side to say that a fetus is fully formed at 12 weeks is incorrect.
But I think it's important. But I think it's important to state, though, that at 12 weeks, that child has a fully formed face, that child has a beating heart from 22 days, that child has 4 working limbs moving around, that they can suck their thumb, and that they have fully formed vocal cords. This is you or I.
And it also doesn't have fully formed items.
But what if? Can I ask? What if someone had taken the choice to end you or your own life at this point?
I simply wouldn't know a thing about it, and I would be very happy if my mother had decided that she wasn't able to cope with my pregnancy for whatever reason, and she terminated me. A, I wouldn't know anything about it, and B, I would be very happy that she, as a grown woman, made the right decision for her and her family.
As a society, there are certain values that underpin a working, sane, safe society. One of them is the non-aggression principle, where I justifiably cannot come over and hurt you nor end your life. Mm-hmm. They underpin a healthy, safe society. If we violate that, how is that going to work out? That's akin to me saying to you, just leave me finish, just please. Okay. It's akin to me saying, can I drive on? You drive on the left-hand side of the road, I'll drive on the right. It doesn't really work out. Society doesn't work out like that. We're built for connection together.
It really isn't.
I'm going to have to put the two of you here about that. I'm going to carry on now again, and I'm going to go to Maeve. Maeve O'Halloran, have you a question?
I do. So I guess in this discussion we're hearing a lot about medical abortions and abortion pills, and I think one of the things that shocked me when I did my research on this actually was when I looked up about 2 years ago for the first time what happens during an abortion. And what I discovered was that there are also surgical abortions that involve suctioning, dismembering, or actually poisoning into the heart of a beating heart of a live baby. Now, these are procedures, I think, that haven't been spoken about, and given that you're advocating for abortion, for choice, but that is the choice to have an abortion is the only choice that isn't available now. So apart from the fact that it ends a life, are you comfortable that you would be asking, in the name of your choice to end your pregnancy, that you would ask an Irish doctor or nurse to take part in such a graphic procedure? And I would ask as well, why have people not been made aware of this, that these are the procedures we're talking about bringing in, that would be possibly 2,000 minimum at the current rates, 2,000 abortions a year, surgical procedures that would require somebody else to be bumped down the waiting list.
So I suppose the best explanation of that really is, if we break those things down, right? The abortion pill is given every single day in our maternity hospitals, and I personally have had what they call a D&C. I had it after a miscarriage. Your language is pretty vulgar in relation to it, but there
I think
you
there's a bit
go.
of a difference
They're
between
happening.
a D&C and a
can we
live
just
baby.
leave-
And a baby
A
who
D&C
has-
is exactly what you're talking about. That is exactly what it is. They are removing the contents of the womb, and women have them up and down the country, and just because their reasons are different doesn't make the procedure different.
But Rebecca, there's a huge difference in those procedures. In a D&C, tragically, a baby has already died, they've already lost their life, and a doctor is doing a medical procedure. During a surgical abortion, which is similar to a D&C, a doctor is going in where there's a live baby and actually dismembering that baby limb from limb. There is a huge difference there, and I think for me, that is something I would hate to think that any of our doctors or nurses in this country would be forced to take part
I think
in.
that you're not having enough respect for the doctors and nurses that work in this country, that see the women who live in the grey areas. I think that compassionate induction for those women who live in the grey, I think that we are doing a disservice to the members of our medical community and to people and to what they are aware of, because people are aware of how abortions happen. The vast majority of them happen extremely early, but if you make it illegal, the gestation period is going to be pushed out. They're going to get more complicated. They're going to need surgical abortions, whereas the vast majority will happen before 9 weeks with pills.
In Britain in 2016, there were 15,000 abortions beyond 12 weeks.
This is not Britain.
And a number of those were to Irish women who've had to save up, organise childcare, organise time off work. The number of surgical abortions performed on Irish women as a percentage is greater than the number performed on women from the United Kingdom, for that very reason, because we force them to travel. So by denying women the right to have abortion in Ireland, all you're doing is making sure they have abortions later on.
Okay, just before, I'm sorry to cut you again. I'm going to go to Niamh. Niamh, I want to have you an open question.
Yes, yeah.
Please.
So, although the no side talk a lot about, supports for women, they have been very quiet on what their proposals are if we do not repeal the 8th Amendment. So, excluding amending the Constitution or further legislation for fatal fetal abnormalities or rape, because those have been tried and have failed in the past and they won't be possible. What are your concrete proposals for assisting women? You've already said you're going to allow women to leave the country to obtain terminations in other countries. What are your proposals, concrete proposals, to assist women with a crisis pregnancy?
So I think the first thing to say in response to that is that each and every year the pro-life campaign lobbies the government in a pre-budget submission with request for funding for various initiatives, one of which has only been funded by the government. Existing pro-life initiatives that are there as we speak are One Day More, which supports women with life-limiting conditions, LIFE, which is a charity organisation which supports single mothers, also Rachel's Vineyard for women who've been hurt by abortion, and Anew, which supports families and women in terms of giving them direct supports for antenatal services and financial supports. I think what needs to be remembered is that, and I really believe that both sides of the argument here are agreed on the fact that each and every time that a woman travels for an abortion or takes an abortion pill, that's a tragedy. I think everyone knows that and everyone recognises that. And there's no one on this particular side that is advocating that we should abandon these women. Absolutely not. What we're here to do is to talk about how can we properly support women. How can we properly support women and their families? How can we increase their financial supports? How can we increase childcare supports, antenatal services? How can we increase mental health services? In a GP setting, there is little to no daily counselling available, little to none. Like, that's something that we could start straight away. as a society. We can have perinatal hospices, improve housing supports. There's so much that we can do together as a society. And I think to start down the wrong road is not an answer. We need to look here, and the government, instead of using careful deliberation and precision in order to execute some of these and orchestrate some of these manifest proposals, they've brought a sledgehammer. And the government's proposals are completely visionless. Completely visionless. We're talking about ending children's lives as being a solution. Well, where are we going as a society?
Okay, so I didn't really get any concrete suggestions. Again, what I was hoping for was maybe you'd worked out some budgets on something, or you had specific programs that you were going to put in.
Is that our dual responsibility? Because I hear you advocating for the woman, okay, not for the child, but I hear you advocating for the woman.
I do have a 1 minute rebuttal, so if I could just finish, thanks. So you talked about a GP-led mental health service. Like as far as I can remember, when the GP-led service, abortion service was mooted, one of the issues with it was that GPs are overworked and have too many patients at the moment. So how do you see that fitting in? Do you think GPs have the qualifications to lead a mental health service?
But how, like, I suppose this just starts at where's our aspiration here? I mean, you're absolutely...
Could you answer that question?
But I absolutely am. No, just give me a second.
Like,
look, the reality is here that, like, you know, if we decide to just throw our hat at this and say, look, we just can't do it, what are we doing? I mean, there's nothing has ever been achieved by any country which has been led by true leaders that hasn't involved having to have a vision. Like the government's proposal, as I said, is completely visionless. Currently, you're absolutely right. We are stretched. We are completely stretched in primary care. Another reason, ethics aside, why this proposal to have it a GP-led service abortion is absolutely ludicrous. But aside from that, you're absolutely right. If we're to bring in these initiatives, we need funding, we need training, we need counsellors, we need all of this. But at least let's start there. I think that's we need to at least invest in these and look at proper proposals.
I have to cut again, Doctor. Look, finally, I'll give you 30 seconds. Just can you respond to that?
Well, just to say, with the GP-led service for the abortion pills, if every GP in Ireland were to see somebody, it would be about 2 patients a year. So it's not exactly a stretch.
It's not GP-led anywhere else in the world, by the way. It's not GP-led.
Right. I need now a closing statement from Niamh on behalf of the yes vote for Friday, please.
Okay, in 3 days' time, we are being asked whether we want to maintain the status quo and continue to have Irish women and girls travelling to the UK to obtain an abortion, or sourcing abortion pills and taking them here in Ireland without medical supervision and at the risk of a jail sentence. Or whether we want to change things so that Irish women and girls can obtain the help they need here in Ireland, cared for and guided by their own GPs and medical professionals. I ask you on the 25th of May that when you go to cast your vote, you bring in with you, in your mind, the 170,000 women we know have had to travel from Ireland since 1991. I want you to be able to look them in the eye, each one individually, as you cast your vote. And I want you to justify your decision to each one of them. I want you to justify your decision to the woman for whom another pregnancy would have meant spending the rest of her life in a wheelchair, to the woman for whom another pregnancy would have meant a life on dialysis or permanent blindness, to the woman who was denied contraception by her husband, but who beat her so badly the last time she was pregnant she miscarried, or to the child who cannot understand the pain that was inflicted on her body, or why she is forced to live with the reminder of it on a daily basis. I want you to go into that voting booth on the 25th of May and look those 170,000 women in the eye and say, I understand you. I am with you. And for all of you, I am voting yes.
Thank you, Niamh, from the yes. Can I have a closing statement, please, from Dr. Brendan Crowley?
So May 25th will be a defining moment in our nation's history. 100 years ago, we elected the first Dáil Éireann, inspired by the 1916 proclamation and its promise to cherish all the children of the nation equally. Now again, we are faced with a turning point in our history. I ask you to vote no to save the lives of thousands of babies who will die if the 8th Amendment is repealed. As a medical doctor, I know that these lives can be saved if the government act on our pro-mother and child proposals to support women and their babies. Throughout this campaign, the Yes side has continually misrepresented and exaggerated the threat to the life and health of pregnant women in this country. Leading obstetrician colleagues have reassured us that women's lives and health are protected by the 8th Amendment, and Ireland is one of the world's maternal healthcare leaders, and this will continue to be the case if we vote no on May 25th. Abortion on demand is not acceptable and discriminates against those with disability. Abortion on demand will happen unless we vote no and stop the government implementing the proposals they have published. These will give a blank cheque to politicians to remove all constitutional rights from all unborn children. If you doubt this, please take a look at the government's proposals. If you want to support women with true compassion, vote no. If you want to create an equal society that values all members, vote no. If you believe that the unborn baby should have a right to life, vote no. If you don't want GP surgeries turned into abortion clinics, vote no. If you don't want your taxpayers' money invested in abortion, vote no. If you believe that it's unacceptable that any unborn child can be targeted with abortion up to 6 months, vote no. We as Irish people have always been a life-affirming and compassionate people, and I ask you to vote no, and I ask you to vote no to support unborn children and their mothers.
I just want to say thanks to Dr. Brendan Crowley, Maeve O'Halloran, Rebecca Hercody and Niamh Cosgrove were very passionate at the end. And for everyone for tuning in for Cork Live, Mark O'Sullivan here. So you've seen it from the no, you've seen it from the yes. So it looks like Friday's the day. We see you all. Thank you. Cork Live, Mark O'Sullivan.